Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. My guest tonight is an author of a brand new book about family and parenthood and the challenge of raising children, etc. Stephanie, how do I pronounce your last name?
Cesca.
Again?
Cesca like Fresca.
Cesca like Fresca, fantastic, is a communications consultant who specializes in strategic planning, digital content, and speech writing. She's a former journalist, and she spent 6 years in Paris, France at the International Herald Tribune, and was also national editor of the Toronto Star. The unpublished manuscript of her debut novel, Dotted Lines, was shortlisted for the University of Toronto Marina Demet Award. She's a graduate of Western University and Ryerson University, and she lives in Toronto with her husband and children. Dotted Lines is her debut novel. Fantastic. And the debut novel is about someone abandoned as a child who seeks stability and belonging after her mom's boyfriend is left to raise her. But she thinks she's got a raw deal. She grows up to have a head on her shoulders and a strong bond with her stepdad. But her dreams of having a family of her own are shattered when she suffers tragedy and betrayal. She's forced to confront the kind of dysfunction that robbed her of a conventional upbringing. Melanie, the character in the book, must choose between giving up on her dream of having a family or embracing a different form of motherhood. Fascinating. Stephanie, Cesca like Fresca, why'd you write this book? What motivated you?
I would say motherhood and parenthood motivated me and inspired me to write this book. I guess I'll start by saying I'd always wanted to write a novel, and I'd always dreamed of writing a story and a book, but I didn't really have a strong idea for a while. And it really took me a number of years. And it wasn't until I became a mom that I think I gained the perspective and the insight that I needed into being a parent and how challenging it is. And, thinking about all the hard truths about being a mom and being a dad and how difficult it is, how important family is. I don't know if a lot of people like to admit this, but it shapes us in so many ways, not only in our childhood, but in adulthood, right? Like it just guides so many things about our childhoods, guide our decisions and stay with us long into, adulthood. Also how dysfunctional families are. And I don't know any family that wouldn't say that they have problems or issues. I think there's no shame in saying that, families
You think
are
every
messy.
family has problems and issues?
I would say absolutely. Dysfunction is normal. Sometimes dysfunction is healthy. And I think, even in the messiness of family, there can be beauty, which there is in this book. And then the other thing, is just how hard, how tough parenting is. And I think all of those things, I tried to work all those elements when I was writing this book.
Why and how can dysfunction be healthy?
Why and how can it be healthy? Oh, I think it's formative. It helps us become and grow as individuals, as children. Life is messy. If we all had idyllic childhoods, how would that set us up for adulthood? It would be one strange world, I think.
So the whole, what is it? The parachute mom that tries to protect her kids from everything is actually doing her children a disservice?
I don't I don't want to come here and judge other moms. Certainly in Melanie's case, the character's case, she has to deal with some pretty difficult things in her life as a child. And I think that sets her up to sort of navigate a lot of choppy waters when she's an adult, because she does face, some serious things in her life. And I think because of the experiences she had in her childhood, that helps her and that enables her to sort of get through them.
Tell us a little bit about this childhood. I understand she was abandoned by her mother. She didn't know her father. Tell us a little bit about her story.
Right. So Melanie, when the book starts, Melanie Forsyth is a 7-year-old child. She is being raised by a single mom, and she doesn't know who her biological father is. Her mom kind of gets together with this guy, strange guy named Dave, and they move in together very suddenly. Mom finds out the mom is pregnant almost immediately. Mom has the baby, struggles with it incredibly, and suddenly abandons the family. So Melanie is, left with this man, her mom's former boyfriend. There's no biological connection between them, and really feels like a third wheel. struggles with, belonging and identity, I think for good reason. But despite that, her and this guy, Dave, they develop a very strong bond together. And I think that bond is what, guides her through her life when she is struck by a few terrible things in her own life. And you mentioned tragedy, betrayal. I don't want to give away too many things about the novel, but it is that relationship that really, guides her through all of it.
In what your publicist sent me, she was suggesting that most people reading this think that Dave is going to turn into the evil guy and do something dastardly, but he actually becomes a hero. Is that correct?
That's correct. He's not the villain. He's the hero of the book. And I don't know if that, I think that was something that was feedback that I received by early readers when I was writing it, when I was writing the story, and also later on, even when the book was finished and it was polished, people had always assumed that Dave was going to be a bad guy. And I think, if you look at, fiction and literature, the step parent, like back to Cinderella, was always, evil, evil and bad. So I think that instincts, that was the instinct, or that's what the feeling was when they were reading it. But he's the opposite. Not only is he a good, solid guy, but he's a tremendous person, and he gives Melanie a wonderful gift in life. She faces some pretty tough things as a kid, and so she's a victim in that respect. But but she's also the recipient of so much love and support throughout her whole life, and I think that's a very unique and special relationship.
I understand that you're also a stepchild. Is there accuracy? Is this a memoir or is it fiction?
This is absolutely not a memoir. I have no problem saying that. This is fiction. I am a former journalist, but I had no loyalty to the truth here. This is not autobiographical. But there are elements, I did lean on some aspects of, my own life. This story, Dotted Lines, tells the story of a wonderful father. And I have a few wonderful fathers in my life. I have an amazing stepdad, who I've known since I was, I would say 17 or so. I have a biological father as well, who I'm very close to and I talk to. And then I also have my husband, who's a great dad. So I had a lot of great father figures that I used for inspiration in the character of Dave.
So many things I have read, or frankly, authors I've interviewed, men are always bad people. Sounds like men in your life have been okay, and the men in the book are okay.
Very true. Yeah, the men in my life, as I mentioned, have been wonderful, and the man in Melanie's life is tremendous, for sure.
So that's sort of different than a lot of other books right now. Why did you decide to do that? It's sort of almost countercultural.
Yeah, it is a little bit, and some people have given me that feedback, and I welcome that. That means I'm talking and writing about something fresh and interesting. And let's face it, there are a lot of amazing dads out there, and I thought this is a great celebration of fatherhood and all the great dads that are doing good work.
Is the mom that abandoned Melanie the villain?
I wouldn't say there are, good guys and bad guys in the story. There's a lot of, there's difficult characters, there's layered characters. Like in real life, people have good moments and bad moments, and they have good aspects and bad aspects. I feel that Melanie's mother was a very troubled person. She struggled a lot with the difficulties of parenthood, and I think loved her daughter but couldn't cope with what was going on. And I think there are other mothers out there that could understand how she was feeling in that situation. So yeah, I wouldn't say she was a bad person. She was just somebody who was struggling.
But to leave behind 2 children.
To leave behind, yes, and I think that speaks to the desperation she was feeling in the moment, and coping with terrible postpartum and just struggling to cope. So it was an act of desperation, but that does happen, unfortunately, in real life as well.
I'm told that your novel examines the key question of what it really means to be family. It explores how our families shape us and guide our decisions our entire lives. Does it mean to really be family?
It's a great question. I think for the character of Melanie, the definition of family is something that evolves throughout the novel. She struggles to define family and even has a hard time explaining her own family situation to other people. And she feels that because she doesn't have a biological link to her, the person that she is closest with, she feels as if she doesn't have a family. It takes her whole life, at least the life that's in this book, to realize that, it's not really about who gives you life, but about who gives you love. And Dave may not be her biological father, but he surrounds her with constant love and support. And so she learns throughout the story that that is what family means, and that is the true meaning.
How does Dave feel about his daughter?
He's very close with her, and he loves her. He tries his best. He's a struggling dad too. He's got a lot on his plate. He's got to put food on the table. He doesn't. There's not a ton of money to work with. There's not a lot of time. But I think he does his best, and he does truly love her, and I think that comes through in the story.
You say that families shape us and guide us and our decisions our entire lives. Really? Do you believe that?
So I see it in my own family, like certain, in small ways and in big ways. Like, just a small example is like, what we always we used to talk over each other in our when I was growing up at the dinner table, always like we were such poor listeners because we were always trying to talk over the next person. And that's something I absolutely see in my own children. I see that I've passed that down to them. We're still talking over each other at the dinner table. And absolutely, I think we see that all the time.
This is fascinating. We're going to have a continued conversation in just 2 minutes. I'm going to ask our guest author to maybe read something of her book. We're going to talk a little bit more about families, and we're going to talk about where the title Dotted Lines came from. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. My guest tonight is Stephanie Cesca. She is an author, and her debut novel is called Dotted Lines, and it's about an interesting individual whose mother abandons her, and she's raised by her stepfather. She has her own challenges in life, and she grows to understand the meaning of family, according to Stephanie, and that we'll learn something from that. Stephanie, where does Dotted Lines come from? Interesting title for a book that doesn't sound like Dotted Lines.
The title came from a scene I was writing. It was when Melanie, the main character, had to write a school assignment. And the assignment was for her to design a family tree and write about her family. And for her, this was probably the worst thing she could ever be asked to do because she doesn't know how to explain herself in her family situation. So she takes the assignment to her stepdad Dave and asks for help. She's absolutely desperate to do this school project. And Dave very calmly kind of sits her down at the table, and together they work through it, and they design the family as best as they could, filling in the holes and such. And when it comes to connect them, she's like, what are we going to say? How can we connect us in this family tree? You're the person I'm closest with, but we're not family. And so Dave has the idea to link his part of the family tree to Melanie's with the dotted lines to show that they're still connected. They're still family even on the page. So it was when I was writing that scene, the use of the word dotted lines kind of immediately jumped out at me, and I knew that needed to be the title of the book.
I think this is brilliant. You may start a trend. You think about what is it? 57% of all families end up in divorce. All marriages end up in divorces. There's got to be lots of stepdads and stepmoms and stepchildren that you don't know how you put them in the family tree, and they are pretty important. And so maybe dotted lines is a new way of doing it. Fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to say, I read a statistic as I was like, writing this and editing. I looked it up. I was curious, like how many people fall into these shoes, and it was quite significant. It was the last number I saw from Statistics Canada, I believe it was from 2016, was 3 out of 10 Canadian children either have a step parent or single parent or don't live with their biological parents at all. So yeah, 3 out of 10. So quite a happy number. If you think about a classroom of 30 kids, that's about, 10 of them.
That's incredible. Can you
Yeah,
read us something from the book?
I can. So this is a chapter called Reminders. And this is after Melanie's mom has left. It was clear as the weeks went on that mom wasn't coming back. We hardly spoke about her, but there were reminders everywhere. Half of Dave's closet was still full of her clothes. The cupboard under the bathroom sink had all of her things, a plastic bin with hair ties, safety pins, and old bottles of nail polish. The basement had a box we brought over that Mom hadn't even unpacked. I asked Dave if we could sort through it. I think deep down I wanted to find a clue about why she left or where she'd gone, but Dave didn't want to touch it. Not yet, kiddo, he said. So we left everything untouched. I thought of her belongings, the pink and blue floral dress she wore with the brown suede belt, her favorite silver moon-shaped earrings, her coffee mug with the red geese on it. I wondered what, if anything, she took with her. It was possible she started a new life with all new possessions, things that wouldn't remind her of the family she left behind.
So she left with no notification.
She left quite suddenly, yeah. She left quite, there was a fight, there was a dispute, and then she walked out on her family. But it had been building for some time.
Did she ever come back? Did she ever contact Stephanie? Not Stephanie, Melanie?
Melanie, there was
Freudian slip, I apologize.
it's okay. Well, I don't know if I want to give that away to the reader. I will say that wasn't the last we've seen of the mother. I will say that.
Okay, wonderful. What's the other kid? Is it another daughter or a son?
There's a half sister named Jessie. So Melanie has a half sister who's Dave's daughter.
And what's the relationship with Jessie?
Quite charged, difficult, I would say. Yes, they fight a lot, and Jessie is a very difficult child.
And is it because Jessie thinks that she's the real daughter, or is it just because of her personality?
I think both, for sure, both, and also, Melanie is dealing with a lot of insecurity, and so I think she doesn't realize it, but she also can be quite difficult to deal with. She's in this family where she's kind of always feeling a little bit on the defensive because she feels as if she doesn't belong. So that makes for a difficult relationship as well.
I've been at a couple of events this summer where there's two gay men and married or together, and two lesbian females and divorced families and step kids and a whole bunch of array of different combinations. Do you think that's more normal? Are we more accepting of that, or is it still a big struggle? And your book is one example of the struggle.
I think we're absolutely seeing more of that, and I think there's more awareness and acceptance. When at the time when this was happening, Melanie is a child. She grew up in the 70s, so she was born in the 70s and grew up in the 80s. I think there wasn't that same level of awareness, so it was quite difficult then. And I think people still may struggle with certain aspects. I have a sister who is 20 years younger than me. And so sometimes, I have to, explain like the relationship, like who's the mom, who's the sister, how does this all work out? Sometimes it makes for awkward or uncomfortable moments, even something as small as that. So
20 years different that's a generation.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
So when you went to Western, or when Melanie goes to Western and has to explain the relationship, how does that happen?
Yeah, like in some cases, they think, a stranger would assume that her and her dad were related. They say, oh, wow, don't you look like your old man, for just as one example. And they would go with it. Other times she would be silent and just struggle, quietly to herself. It really would depend on the situation. But I think in each and every scenario, she definitely struggled, even if it was an internal struggle. But that is something that she works throughout the novel, I think.
You would have been probably what, in second or third year at Western when you found out you were going to have a baby sister. How did you react to that news?
Oh, well, it was exciting, it was a surprise for sure, but it's been wonderful. My relationship with my sister is quite different from the one that you see in this book, so it's been a happy relationship.
Your sister's not like Jessie,
No, I'm happy to say she isn't.
but
Maybe in some
still,
moments, maybe
all,
some moments, but
still, all of a sudden having someone join your family 20 years younger than you. Were you expecting it, or was it a surprise?
it was a surprise. Absolutely was a surprise, but it was, a lovely surprise. But it changes the dynamic too of the family, right? It was the family that we knew became something different when she arrived.
Fascinating, but lots of families are like that today.
Yeah, yeah, and then it helps, with the stories for sure.
Now, we talked a little bit about how families help your decisions or influence your decisions long term. So, are you a believer in nurture over nature?
I believe in both. I believe absolutely nurture over nature, but nature is strong too. And the character of Dave talks a little bit about that because he has two daughters, and they're so different. They're so completely different, and he tries to explain to Melanie that Jessie is just her own person. She is who she is, and I can't change certain things.
So one of the terms that people have bandied around a lot lately is generational trauma,
Oh
and that
yes.
if a mother something happens, it'll end up happening with a daughter just through the genes, whether it's socialized in her or not. So was there generational trauma between Melanie and her mother that abandoned her?
Would say absolutely. And I think, she is aware of that and grows up and there is an awareness. And I think at the end of the book and the novel, Melanie faces a key decision, and it's whether effectively is she going to pass down that generational trauma, or is she going to break the curse, so to speak. And I think that's the central question and where we end up with at the end of the story.
Oh my gosh, it's exciting. And does she or doesn't she?
Can't say, you
You
got to
can't
pick up the
say.
book.
Does she abandon her family as well?
Does Melanie abandon her family?
Yes.
Melanie's whole goal in life is to create the family that she always
Wanted.
kind of dreamed of. Right, right. So that is that's kind of what she aspires to and what she's working towards building throughout the book.
Sounds like a fascinating book. I look forward to
Yeah.
reading it. Thank
Thank
you
you
so
so
much.
much.
We're
Thank
going to
you.
take a break for some messages and come back, and we're going to chat with Stephanie a little bit about her and her career, and try to put this incredible book and its author in a bit of perspective. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. We're chatting tonight with Stephanie Cesca, like Fresca, I'm told.
Cesca.
Cesca, who
Cesca like Fresca.
Cesca like Fresca, who not only is an author with her debut novel that we've just been talking about called Dotted Lines, but she's also been a journalist and a communication professional. You spent, what is this, 5 years in Paris, France? Are you like
Right.
Emily in Paris? This book, this radio, this TV show that everyone's watching?
Oh yeah, I love that show. It's fun. Yeah, yeah. I was the OG Emily, I guess you could call me.
The original Emily. And so tell us a little bit about your life in Paris. What were you doing? You were a columnist or a reporter?
No, I was a newspaper editor for the International Herald Tribune. It's now since been rebranded. It was taken over, so now it's the International New York Times. But at the time, I went over. It was 2002 that I went over. It was shortly after I finished my graduate studies in journalism, and I thought I'd stay, maybe a year, get some international work experience, and it ended up being such an adventure and such a great job that I stayed for. It was a total of 6 years. So yeah, that was a fun time.
And where did you live in Paris?
I kind of lived all over, in the suburbs, in the city center. I was like in the 11th arrondissement and the 16th arrondissement, kind of moved from, yeah, a couple of places. So I got exposure to quite a few neighborhoods.
And what was it like living in Paris? Is what you would have been in your late 20s or early 30s?
I was in my 20s at the time. I would say it definitely, at the beginning, it definitely wasn't as glamorous as everybody thinks it was. It can be, it could be a tough town, and you have to, ride the metro with some shady figures, and it can be a dangerous city as well. It sort of took me a while to establish myself and find my way, but I feel like I was like eating baguettes and living the life at some point. It just took me a little while to get there.
And International Herald Tribune was a paper that many of us that were traveling internationally would read. So that must have been an interesting journalistic experience.
It was, yeah, it was an amazing journalistic experience. Remember, this was 2002, so it wasn't, it was post 9/11, so there was still, terrorism was the big story. So it was a fascinating time to be living abroad and covering that story.
And there were strikes, student strikes in Paris around that time, were there not?
Oh, there was all kinds of strikes, transit strikes, student strikes. I can't remember exactly. Yeah, but that was definitely part of the country back then.
I remember being in the Latin Quarter on a trip in the early 2000s and got chased around by student strikes, as I remember.
Oh, sorry that happened.
No, it was fun actually. I thought it was
Then,
kind of interesting to be
yeah,
sitting in a nice cafe in the Latin Quarter and seeing these students zoom by, and then the police on motorcycles chasing them, etc. Is quite the interesting experience.
great city, a fascinating city.
Incredible city. Everything from the Champs-Élysées and the biggest sidewalks I've ever seen in my life, which are spectacular, stroll along to the Latin Quarter with the smallest sidewalks, if there's any sidewalks at all. So it was fun, and
Right.
great restaurants, great hotels, and incredible museums. So then you came back, and then you became a editor here as well in Toronto. Is that correct?
Yes.
Tell us
Yeah,
about
I
that.
was. So I was at the Toronto Star, I believe maybe about probably 7 or 8 years. So I was also an editor there. I worked a city assignment. I worked my way up to deputy national editor. Then I was national editor. And then I left my career in journalism and I moved over to communications. And then I worked for the government of Ontario. So doing communications for them for a
What does
while.
an editor do?
At the news when I was at the newspaper, I was so a news editor can mean a lot of things. So it was assigning the stories, shaping the stories, reading them at the end of the day, writing the headlines, posting online. It was quite a number of things.
So you're editing, but you're not writing. Did you want to be a writer?
Always, yeah. I would say yes. I definitely wanted to write fiction. I did, we did write headlines, and I always considered headline writing to be, some a form of poetry, especially for the print editions, and not online, because you had to, sometimes they'd be really tight and small, and you'd have to say so much with so few words. So I just love that, and I love the challenge too.
A form of poetry. I've never heard that before. That's interesting.
Yeah,
And then
debatable.
what did you do? What's a communications person with the province of Ontario? What do you do there? Isn't it just trying to persuade us that the government's doing a good job when we're not really sure it is or not?
So I'm not in that job anymore. I did it for a number of years, but it was a number of things, communication strategy, yes, to your point, but it was also a lot of writing, speech writing, video script writing. I got to do quite a bit of writing in that job.
Is that a political job or is that a civil service job?
I was on the civil service side. Yeah, I was a bureaucrat. I worked for cabinet office.
Okay, because I would have thought that a lot of the communications people one thinks of are very partisan and have to be very partisan because they're supporting a specific party in a government, and so it must have been challenging doing that from the civil service and trying to be not partisan.
Yeah, yes and no. I would say no. Like I was a professional, so I did my job,
And
and
then
that's
you
my
gave it
answer.
all up
And then
to
I gave
spend
it all.
5 years writing a book.
That's what I did. Yeah, I definitely have. I still work. I do work full time, but I do more. I would say corporate writing, some technical writing, and I find that I have more more mental spaces and mental clarity, I would say, to write fiction, because it takes a lot out of me, and I need time, to think. And I'm just in the process of finishing up my second book now. And yeah, I just find like walking, time in the park, all of that is really helpful to me, and I need to take that time in order to be effective in front of the laptop telling that story and
So I found
writing.
that interesting that your publicist says that you don't sit down at a laptop. You write it when you're on the go in places.
I would say I do all of my thinking away from the computer. So, ideas come to me when I'm, usually when I'm out in the park. I spend a lot of time, walking and jogging, and I think a lot about the book. I think about the characters that I'm writing about. I listen to music that I think the characters would like, and I kind of, get into their heads a bit. And that's where I come up with all of my ideas for the story. And then when I come back in front of the computer, that's when I kind of execute the ideas that came to me previously.
Do you write early in the morning? Do you write at night? Do you write when it just comes to you? When do you have like I got to do 10 pages a day? What's your sort of practice?
The honest answer is that I don't have a routine. I wish I did. It's really when I find time. So sometimes that's early in the morning, sometimes that's at night, sometimes it's on the weekend. Sometimes, honestly, it could even be on my smartphone when I'm riding the subway. It's when I have the time to get it on the page. I have children and a job, and life is busy. And so I just try to make it work that way.
I just moved, and I think I took about 50 boxes of used books to the used book sale at the local symphony to get rid of them. Is there a future for books?
100%, 100%. And being on Instagram a lot now, because I'm trying to, I'm promoting and I'm talking to other people in the community. I feel like it is so amazing what I'm seeing and how popular books are, and the bookstagrammers, and how the love of reading it, like it is real and it is there, and it is so amazing how many people are out there reading and loving books. So I truly believe there is a future in books. Absolutely, 100%.
Have you done or will you do an audiobook?
I hope so. A lot of people love them. Me personally, I'm a visual learner. I have to see it on the page in order for me, but it works for some people. So that would be great, I think.
What about turning it into a movie or a film or something or other?
That would be terrific. Yeah, I would love that. I love that so many books are the source of so much content that we see, on Netflix and everywhere else. What I just finished watching, the thing with Nicole Kidman, The Perfect Couple, and that is I'm not sure if you've seen that, but that's great, and that's based on the Ellen Hildebrandt novel.
I just saw the first episode. I read one of her books, and it was about a party of a bunch of women after a death in Nantucket, and it was really quite thrilling book. So I'm looking forward to watching some more of the series.
Yeah, it's good, really good.
Is there a different role in screenwriting than there is in being an author of a book?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. I've written one work of fiction so far, or I would say I'm wrapping up my second, but I'm not sure I can answer that.
Would you like to try your hand at screenwriting?
Uh, yeah, I think I'm sure I'm up for, that's a new area of growth or development. To be honest, I hadn't thought of it, but I love writing, so I love the creative process, and I would absolutely be game to try that.
Speech writing you've also done. Is that very
Hmm.
different?
Uh, 100%. Yeah, very, very different. Yeah, couldn't be more from what I'm from this. Yeah, so many different things, are going through your head. Cannot be as creative as I'd like to be when
I
I'm
was in a
writing a speech.
museum in London, England recently, and they had figures to, I can't remember what it was, but the seven literary arts or something like this, and one of them was rhetoric, which is speech writing. Um,
Oh,
is rhetoric something that is a lost art?
uh, that's a good question. I don't know. I don't. What do you think?
I think it is. I don't think that there's many good speechwriters. I think that we need more of them.
They're definitely hard to find. But even in, it took a certain kind of writer. It's a very specialized skill, for sure, I
This
would
has
say.
been a fun conversation. It's a pleasure meeting you. Do you have another passage from the book that you might like to read for us?
Yeah, I would. It might take me a minute to find it.
Sounds like a really interesting story and a captivating one, where you follow Melanie through her life from, what'd you say, young teenager or tween?
Young child to adult. Yeah.
And so is the second book going to be her role as motherhood, or is it going to be a brand new character?
It's a very different story. It's still about relationships, but this one is not about family. This one is about friendship. And it's actually about a decades-long friendship between two men who live in a small town. And the friendship goes through many ups and downs over the years, and then finally kind of blows up pretty badly. So that is that story.
You hear about this new movie where Will Ferrell's friend turns out to be a transvestite and they travel across the country. I'm looking forward to that relationship story.
I have not heard that, but that sounds very interesting.
Do you have another passage for us?
I do. Okay. I tried to survive the weekend without getting into a fight with Jesse. I really did. But when I packed up my things on Monday, I noticed a chunk of pages had been ripped out of my books. Hardcover, brand new, more than $50 a piece. I flipped through my textbook on modern Europe to find more than 3/4 of it missing. I ran downstairs where Jesse was drinking a glass of chocolate milk in front of the television. What the hell is this? I held the book by its spine and waved it in the air. It felt flimsy in my hands. The surviving pages flopped back and forth. Jesse's eyes darted toward me before returning to the TV screen. Looks like a book. Come on, Jess. It's not a joke. I'm going to tell Dave. Tell him I don't care. I didn't do anything. The hell you didn't, I shouted. You wrecked 3 of my books. Those cost a lot of money. Don't blame me for things I didn't do. We have dogs, you know. She was lying and I knew it. But I didn't want to end the weekend on a bad note for Dave. He'd been happy to see me. Instead, I marched upstairs into Jessie's bedroom and yanked her blanket and sheets off of her bed. Still unsatisfied, I opened her dresser drawers and pulled all of her clothes and pajamas out, making a big pile on the floor. I did the same in her closet. Anything on a hanger was pulled off and added to the heap. My breathing was heavy as I surveyed the room. Pink and purple t-shirts she hadn't worn in years were mixed in with her more recent clothes. I noticed a pair of jeans, several sweatshirts, her old ballet costume from her failed recital, and then I saw it in the corner, a training bra. It was white cotton with one of those 3 loop clasps on the back. I thought of what I could do. The scissors, where were they? I rifled through her desk drawer, but all I could find was a broken ruler and some loose leaf paper. I marched into the bathroom and opened the bottom drawer until I found what I was looking for. I took the scissors and in each cup of the bra, cut out a large hole. It goes on.
Nasty, very.
Nasty, yeah. Sisters.
Stephanie, this has been wonderful. Please remind us all the name of the book.
So the name of the book is Dotted Lines, published by Guernica Editions. October 1st is the official publication date.
And where can we get it?
It's available through the publisher, Amazon, Indigo, or local bookstores.
And are you doing a reading anytime soon?
I will. I'm going to be actually having a launch October the 6th. And that will be from 2 to 4 at CSI Annex. That's Bloor and Bathurst area. So I'm going to be doing a launch and a reading at that event. And there will be a few others. I'm going to come to London. I'm going to go out to Kingston, and I'm also going to go to Richmond Hill as well.
Awesome. Well, good luck with the launch of the book. It sounds like a fascinating one, and you're a fascinating character unto yourself, with a really interesting story. I imagine if you ever do the memoir, the time in London in Paris will be quite interesting.
Thank you so much.
That's our show with Stephanie Cesca, like Fresca, and the book Dotted Lines. Sounds like an interesting one. We're going to take a break and come back with some concluding comments in just 2 minutes. Thanks, Stephanie. Really appreciate it.